Another four, you can answer this.
Thank you, Chairman. The Kenya Kwanza manifesto to review the terms of service for the police officers, and some of the complaints that the officers make about their working conditions are actually right, they are correct, they are justified. So we shall be looking at how to handle that within the resource constraints of the country and also within the independence and mandate of the Salaries and Remunerations Commission. But one way of even achieving some of the things that the non-benefit aspects of welfare is by reviewing the ministry's existing budget to remove non-core expenditure and deploying that expenditure to facilitate officers to protect our country, to protect our people and their property. With regard to cartels and drug barons, the Cabinet Secretary provides policy direction to the National Police Service and the other formations under the ministry. Through this oversight, which is provided in law, we will make sure that no protection is afforded to any officer or any person who is associated with drug cartels and drug barons. So we are going to perform our duty to provide the policy oversight on our forces. Because when the instructions and policy direction come from the top, it's easier to manage than when there is none. With regard to proliferation of small arms and light weapons, I would like to respond as follows. That one, we may have to review and look at the framework for licensing of firearms in this country to ensure that the right people are the people who are licensed to carry firearms. Secondly, with regard to firearms already in possession of in the hands of criminals, we will have to review our policy on disarmament, demobilization and reintegration to ensure that we mop out firearms in the wrong hands. And this is associated with the program that we discussed earlier in this session about how to ensure that we pacify and make it peaceful in most of the countries where bandits are reigning supreme. With regard to sub-counties, all sub-counties, locations, sub-locations which have already been established by law should have personnel. So I'll be sitting with all leaders who are representing areas which have this kind of needs, and this will be something that we'll implement with immediate effect so long as a sub-county has been gazetted in accordance with the law and the locations and sub-locations have been created in accordance with the established procedure. With regard to boundaries, the Constitution of 2010 froze the review of boundaries and applied the Districts and Provinces Act of 1992. But the Constitution also in Article 188 requires a review of boundaries, county boundaries, through a process which is independent from the electoral and boundaries process. So some of these historical issues will be resolved through that way. But in the meantime, the struggles around boundaries are normally struggles that are fueled by political leaders. What I know from my experience as a leader is that there are genuine grievances among citizens about ownership of property. And therefore, the ongoing reforms on the land information management system that will provide the cadastre of the entire country will help remove these issues on who owns which property, because there are some people with title deeds on top of other people's property. The Ministry of Lands has just completed the cadastre for Nairobi City. I have been fortunate to see that cadastre, and you'll be shocked, people owning plots on roundabouts, on top of people's buildings, and inside Karura Forest. So once this cadastre process, and the Kenya Kwanza, the executive order signed by the President on 12th of October, has already identified this area of land information management, rolling out of these limbs and the preparation of the national cadastre as one of the reforms that will be taken across the country, so that you know where your property is and nobody has a title deed on top of somebody else's farm. But the boundaries issue will have to be resolved in accordance with Article 188 of the Constitution and in accordance with the Districts and Provinces Act of 1992. Finally, on the issue of refugees, the traditional methods of providing durable solutions to the refugee problem, namely voluntary repatriation, local integration, and resettlement to third countries, the ministry will pursue them a little more robustly, especially considering genuine cases of local integration for refugees who have lived in this country for 40-50 years and are not under any negative security profile. There is no need of sending somebody home who was born here and is 55 years old. He's going home, he's going to a country just to die. He's going to a country of his death as opposed to a country where he has lived all his life. But we'll couple this with the resettlement and as well as voluntary repatriation for those who want to voluntarily return to their countries. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'll now give the floor to the Honorable Mukami, Morugara, and Mule, and Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Chair. The nominee, Professor Kindiki, congratulations. Professor, Kenya has been experienced numerous disasters in the past, ranging from bomb blasts, terror attacks, floods, collapsing of buildings, to name but a few. Whenever this happens, it only confirms lack of preparedness. Despite having a national emergency response unit, as the cabinet secretary in charge of this unit, what measures will you put in place to raise the level of preparedness to respond effectively to the emergency and national disaster? And finally, through the chair, Professor Kindiki, you come from our region. Our children, our future generation, are getting finished because of alcohol. I don't know what you are going to do, and I am praying, if God give you this chance to serve as a cabinet minister, I'm praying, kindly try, if you go to our schools and in the surrounding areas, our children are finished. Thank you, Professor Kindiki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You are voter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, it's the voters who have sent me to him to ask these questions on their behalf, and they are listening.
You're entitled to one.
No. This, you have to indulge me because of, but I'll be very fast in asking these questions. Number one, it's from the border riders, the school bus drivers, and everybody. It is welcome that you are going to improve the terms of service of the police officers, including their remuneration and housing. However, we know as a matter of fact that on every road, these officers do erect illegal road tolls, roadblocks, and stops so that they can extort money from poor citizens of the country, including border riders. What will you do as the minister, and as soon as you have improved these terms to end that corruption which happens? What are you going to do to ensure that we do not hear of these illegal roadblocks and tolls, etc., etc.? Number two, the police officers themselves are asking. We have a huge shortage of police officers in the country. The ratio is possibly 1 to 6,000 persons, which is not acceptable because the world standards are about